So let's take a look at this meme that's been making the rounds. It looks like a lot of people agree with this sentiment, that in 1980, people could get an entire cart full of groceries for just $20 and also buy a house for as little as $15,000. But is this true?
No, of course not.
I find it interesting that one thing that this meme leaves out is the fact that Americans made less money in 1980. The fact is, despite all the problems with the US economy, Americans have made more and more money over the last 40 to 50 years. When controlling for inflation, both the median personal income and the median family income have steadily increased since the 1980s. Keep in mind that these numbers are undercounting because they don't factor in non-wage compensation like, say, health insurance, along with government welfare programs. Even median family wealth is up since the 1980s, despite taking a massive hit during the Great Recession, according to data from the Federal Reserve and Pew Research. And don't let anyone try to tell you otherwise, especially with the way politicians shriek and shrill about stuff like wealth inequality. Woo! Politicians love bringing up wealth inequality and income inequality to obfuscate the fact that Americans are making more and more money. I even read a deranged rant recently about how the ruling class has been screwing over American working families since the 1980s, and about how the bottom half of Americans have less wealth today than they did in 1989, and how the top 10% has accumulated like $29 trillion during that same period. This is a fallacy that I have addressed numerous times when reacting to goofballs like Secular Talk and Robert Reich. Except this time, this fallacy comes courtesy of Ron DeSantis.
You absolutely suck!
You would think that someone who has apparently read Thomas Sowell would know better. Now let's start by talking about this alleged $15,000 house, because from what I can tell, this is a huge exaggeration. Not to say that housing prices are not a problem today. I did a whole video last year related to this topic, talking about how inflated house prices are largely a result of government policies that have constrained housing supply. But I also doubt that houses were as cheap as $15,000 in 1980. According to the Fed, the Federal Reserve's economic data, using U.S. Census data, the average price of a house that was sold in 1980 was roughly $75,000. The median price of a house sold in 1980 was roughly $66,000, so over 4 times as much as $15,000. And when we compare this to the median family income in 1980, which was roughly $21,000, the price to income ratio was roughly 3-to-1. Today, that ratio is roughly 5-to-1, and that ratio would probably be a lot lower if politicians were not screwing around with housing. Others have pointed out that $15,000 in 1980 may have afforded someone a one-bedroom shack or some house in an abandoned Rust Belt city somewhere. I tried to find an example of a house that was sold in 1980, which was like finding a needle in a haystack. The farthest back I could find was this 3-bedroom house in Southfield, Michigan, which according to Realtor.com sold in 1989 for roughly $100,000. And I don't know about you guys, but I have a hard time believing that this same house sold for anywhere close to $15,000 just 9 years earlier. I also found a few small houses in Detroit that sold in the early 1990s for over twice as much as $15,000. So from what I can tell, houses were not as cheap as $15,000 $1,000 in 1980. It was also mentioned that your mortgage interest rate would have also been much higher during this period, and Federal Reserve data appears to reflect this. Also, from looking at this meme, you would not know that the price for many products during this period have come down a lot since 1980, along with incredible improvements in quality. Here's a Sears catalog from 1983 advertising a 19-inch color television for the low price of $399.95. Today, you can get a flat screen television over twice that size for roughly $130, and this is before you factor in inflation. And maybe in 1980, after you spend roughly 2% of your median family income on a new television set, you might also want to buy a new video game console for the kids, like this Atari 2600, which I guess launched for roughly $190, which was roughly 1% of the median family income during this period. Factor in inflation, and that $190 would be roughly $745 in today's money. The Sony PlayStation 5, meanwhile, is roughly $500 today, or roughly 0.5% of a median family's income today, and the Nintendo Switch is even cheaper at roughly $300. And do I even need to compare the quality of these consoles?
No, of course not.
And we see similar trends with computers and cell phones and cameras and other electronics. Now, as for the groceries in this shopping cart, first off, it's difficult to even classify most of these items. Secondly, with the items that I can make out, I had trouble finding data on these particular items so that I can compare them to the prices of these same items today. So it's hard to tell how accurate this $20 figure is, but considering that this meme exaggerated the house price, I'm gonna guess that the groceries in this shopping cart cost more than $20 in 1980. With that said, let's compare some of the items in this shopping cart. One thing I noticed is that this lady has a box of Kellogg's Corn Flakes in this shopping cart. Luckily, I found a website called Money Not Money that has an article talking about the price evolution of corn flakes, showing that the price of a box of corn flakes has varied between 1980 and 2014, peaking in 1987 when adjusting for inflation. Nevertheless, according to this article, a box of corn flakes was roughly $1 in the early 1980s, which when you adjust for inflation would be roughly the same price as a box of corn flakes today at a grocery store like Vons. Not to mention, stores like Kroger sell a knockoff version of corn flakes for roughly $2. I also noticed that this lady has a box of macaroni and cheese in this shopping cart, which according to the Fred, using data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the price of spaghetti and macaroni has doubled since 1984, from roughly 72 cents per pound in 1984 to roughly $1.40 today. However, when you adjust for inflation, the price of spaghetti and macaroni per pound has come down. This New York Times article from 1991 reports that a box of Kraft macaroni and cheese was 54 cents a box, whereas today you can find a box of Kraft macaroni and cheese at Walmart or on Amazon for roughly $1. And when adjusting for inflation, the price is roughly the same. And we see similar trends with rice, which was another item that I noticed in this lady's shopping cart. Economist Jeremy Horpdahl reacted to the same meme by reporting that Americans spend less of their income today on food than at any point in history. And Aziz Sanderji found when comparing data from consumer expenditure reports provided by the Bureau of Labor Statistics dating back to 1984, that Americans are making more money, saving more money, and spending less of their income on food, but spending more of their income on housing. And let's bring this back to income trends. Again, the median family income income in 1980 was roughly $21,000, meaning that $20 in 1980 was roughly 0.09% of the median family income, whereas 0.09% of the median family income today is roughly $83. And when we measure with median personal income, that $20 is roughly $93 in 2023. And when we simply adjust for inflation, that $20 from 1980 would be roughly $78 in 2023. And for what it's worth, here's what $86 worth of groceries can look like today. And this is not to say that the state of food in the United States is perfect, as I highlighted in a recent video where I talk about how government policies have made food in America more expensive. Someone left a comment on that video saying, "Oh my god, food is so cheap for you Americans," which is fair, but I think it's worth keeping in mind.
Life is good, but it can be better.